Hey folks, I'm Trav and this is the Mason Jars Suite. Today we're going to take green beans, a little garlic, a little dill, pickle it all, and we're going to call it dilly beans. So, like many recipes with food in them, you need to acquire the ingredients. What we're going to need today is some green beans, garlic, dill, apple cider vinegar, and then it's up to you if you want to add some other things too. I'm going to add some habanero to these dilly beans. Now usually when we prep green beans for canning or cooking, we want to pick all those little stems off. You could leave them on if you want, but that just means that anybody eating your beans is going to have to pick them off themselves, and nobody wants stems stuck in their teeth. Now there are several ways to do this. You can pick the stems one at a time by just grabbing a hold of the bean and the stem, bending, and just snapping it right off. Beans have to be fresh for this, remember. Now by far the easiest way to do this is just to grab a bunch of beans, tamp them down on a counter so that the stems are all lined up, and then just chop those stems right off. Because efficiency is efficient. If you have decently long thumbnails or fingernails, a little pinch can take the stem right off. This is of course also handy if you want to be a banjo player. So however you do it, let's get all these stems off, let's prep a whole lot of beans, and then it's time to pickle them. Like with any vegetables, whether you grew them or bought them, it's a good idea to wash them. So this is a good excuse to clean your sink, dump the beans in, and give them all a nice scrub. When canning, the cleaner everything is, the better and higher quality your final product is going to be. Now we're not actually going to cook these beans before we put them in jars, so you can just take your clean beans and put them in a bowl or a pot or something else and set them aside for now. Now what we will heat up first is a pickle brine, and I'll tell you here what's flexible, what you can change, and what is not. Now the recipe that I'm using today is going to have a link in the description to this video, so you can go down there, click on that, and print it off. First I'm going to measure everything out. 3/4 of a cup of salt, 5 cups of apple cider vinegar. You could use white vinegar if you prefer. Just make sure that it says right on the bottle that it's at least 5% acidity, because acidity is important when pickling. And then measure out an equal amount of water, 5 cups. Now we'll prepare all the other ingredients that are going to go into these jars. We can add any number of things to these beans for flavor. Since we are making and adding a pickle brine, which is acidic, every single thing that goes into these jars is going to be like a little pickle. Think about that. So this is a good opportunity to experiment and throw some other vegetables and flavors in there. Today, we'll add about 5 or 6 cloves of garlic to each jar. Pull all those cloves off of the garlic head, then to peel them one at a time, I like to take the side of my knife, set it right there on the clove, and just give it a little thwack with the heel of your hand. Just enough to crack the skin, and then it just slips right off. It's also helpful when you're doing this to actually say the word thwack. Now since these are dilly beans, emphasis on the dill, we'll pick some sprigs of fresh dill. Now feel free here to experiment with other herbs if you like. We could make rosemary beans, parsley beans, tarragon beans, thyme, wimey beans. I also want just a little bit of heat in these beans, and so I'm gonna thinly slice some habanero pepper. So gorgeous and dangerous. Take all the ingredients for the brine, the salt, the water, the vinegar, and put them into a big pot. Put the pot on the stove and bring it to a rolling boil. Meanwhile, prepare your water bath canner and get your jars heated up. If you've never used a water bath canner before or pickled in this way, we'll have another video coming out soon that just tells you how to do that. So I'm not going to go into the fine details of water bath canning, but soon you'll be able to click on this box to take you to that video. Once your brine is up to a rolling boil, pull out your hot jars and line them up on a towel, ready to receive the green beans. Into each jar, I'm going to drop 4 or 5 cloves of garlic, followed by a few sprigs of dill and a couple of habanero slices. Go as heavy as you want on these flavors. It's also common to add dill seed and coriander seed, mustard seed, things like that. We're going to add all of these flavoring ingredients first before the beans, just to make sure that every jar gets an even amount of that flavor. Now it's time to pack the beans. We'll load the beans up cold, and then we'll add the boiling brine on top of them. Get as many green beans in there as possible by gathering a bunch, evening out the ends, and then tip the jar just a little bit to an angle so you can lay the beans in there on the side. Some people like to preemptively cut all the beans so that they are exactly the size that they need to be when they go in the jar. we just want to make sure that everything is at least a ½ inch below the surface of the jar. Once you've packed them in, if there's still a little bit of room on top, you can take some other beans, snap them in half, get little pieces, and just jam those all in there to fill up the gap. Because as I say every day, the more beans, the better. I've never said that. Now use a funnel to pour the boiling brine onto the beans. The exact amount just totally depends on how packed in the beans are. Fill to leave a ½ inch of headspace, and then tamp the jar a few times to knock out bubbles. If a bean tries to float out, just encourage it with kind words and maybe a spoon to stay submerged. Always wipe the rims clean with a paper towel or a clean cloth. Now put hot, clean, unused lids on each jar and screw the bands on just to fingertip tightness. Set those gorgeous jars down into your hot canner and get that water up to a boil. This is not a rolling boil, so do not start your timer yet. Once the canner is boiling, set a timer for 10 minutes. That's the same whether you're canning in quarts or in pints. When the time's up, pull them out, set them on a towel or a cutting board, admire them for a little while, and then leave them alone. Revisit them tomorrow once they're totally cooled. Write the words dilly beans all over them with an exclamation mark preferably, and put a date on them, and then store them. If you don't already have lots of friends, then just start telling people that you make dilly beans, and friends will arrive, because everyone likes to hear this sound. And that's how you make dilly beans on the Mason Jar Suite. Thank you so much for watching. Please leave a comment below. Let me know how you like to make dilly beans. Please ask lots of questions, give us some feedback, and let us know what you'd like to see canned next on the Mason Jar Suite.